Senator Heinrich. Senator Kennedy.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Welcome, Madam Secretary.
Thank you,
Madam
Senator.
Secretary, isn't it a fact that the President's proposed budget for next fiscal year is $500 billion more than this fiscal year?
On the spending side?
Yes. That's what a budget is.
Yeah. It is about $400 billion.
It's about
More
$500 billion
in
more,
outlays.
right?
It's about what?
$500 billion more, right?
About that.
Isn't it a fact that since 2019 until today, I'm not including the extra $500 billion that y'all want to spend, since 2019 through today, U.S. population has increased 1.8%, and the federal government's budget is up 55%. Isn't that a fact?
Well, we had a pandemic.
Isn't that a fact, though? Are my
I'm
numbers
not,
right?
I don't know those numbers.
You don't know? You never looked at that?
I don't have those numbers in my head. I'm not disputing them.
Okay. Isn't it a fact that the president's proposed budget proposes $4.7 trillion in new taxes?
It does propose significant additional taxes, yes.
4.7 trillion?
Something like that, yes.
Okay. You talked about reducing deficit. Isn't it a fact that under President Biden's proposed budget, that gross debt will rise from $32.7 trillion at the close of this year to $51 trillion by 2033?
I'm sorry, what number did you give me for?
The president's
2033.
proposed budget will increase gross debt from $33 trillion at the close of this year to $51 trillion in 2033. Isn't that correct?
Well, debt held by the public, which is,
No, ma'am, that's gross debt. Isn't that a fact?
that's probably a fact.
So you haven't reduced the deficit, have you?
The deficit, the debt and deficits are reduced by the president's
How can
budget.
you go from $33 trillion to $51
because-
trillion and call that a reduction in the deficit?
Because that's a calculation for which you need a baseline, and then you compare the budget and the deficits and debt in the budget with a baseline in which there are none of the changes, either in revenues or in spending, that are
Here's
proposed
my
in the
baseline.
budget.
Here's my baseline. At the end of this year, we project, people a lot smarter than me, probably not than you, but smarter than me, say that gross debt's $33 trillion. They say if the president's budget is implemented by 2033, it'll be $51 trillion. Isn't that a fact?
If the president's budget is not implemented and none of the changes are made, it will be worse than that. And so the president's budget has improved the fiscal outlook relative to what we would have without the president's proposals.
Even though it raises gross debt from $33 trillion to $51 trillion, you say that's an improvement.
It is an improvement because it raises taxes by more, and it leads to.
That includes taxes. In what world is that an improvement, other than Washington and La La Land?
It's an improvement in that the revenue increases far exceed proposed investments.
Okay. All right, let me ask you this. Isn't it a fact that in January of 2019, the Federal Reserve issued a warning to Silicon Valley Bank over its risk management systems?
I have no idea. I'm not responsible in any way. for
But
the
you're in charge of the
supervision.
banking bailouts and the crisis, right?
I am not involved in banking supervision, and I don't have access to any information about the supervision of Silicon Valley Bank.
Okay, so you don't know whether or not the Fed, you haven't looked to see whether or not the Fed issued a warning, 4 years ago to the bank over its risk management systems?
That's not public information, and it's not
Sure it is. It's in the
information.
Wall Street Journal.
Well, it may be in the Wall Street Journal, but it's not public information, and it's not information that I have access to.
Well, I'll give you a copy of this article.
I've read the article, but
The Fed issued a matter requiring attention. And it said your risk management practices are terrible and you need to improve them.
that is what the article says.
Right. Isn't it a fact that months before SVB went under, that the bank disclosed that its mark-to-market value of its bonds was $16 billion less than their balance sheet value?
They did make such a statement.
Did the people at the Federal Reserve just not read it?
I'm not at the Federal Reserve.
I know.
I was at the Federal Reserve.
But you're at the Treasury, and you're in charge of the banking crisis. Let me ask you.
I am not in charge of the supervision of the bank.
Let me ask you this. Senator Hinder talked about the 2018 amendments to the Dodd-Frank Act. Isn't it a fact? Now, SVB was not stress tested in 2022. 34 banks were. Here's the Fed's report. Isn't it a fact that if SVB had been stress tested, it would have passed?
Stress tests look at capital of a bank.
Here's yes, ma'am, under the stress test. Isn't it a fact that SVB would have passed?
I don't know. It wasn't stress tested.
You need to look into that, Madam Secretary.
This is not my job. This is the Federal Reserve's job.
Okay, isn't it a fact that when the Federal Reserve stress tested in 2022, it only stress tested credit risk, it didn't stress test duration risk? Isn't that a fact?
I believe the stress tests in general partially address and take account of interest rate
No,
risk.
ma'am. I've read it. Here it is, bigger than Dallas.
Well, to the extent that there are assets held in an available for sale portfolio that would suffer losses due to changing interest rates, that would be captured in the bank's
No, ma'am, it's not
capital.
there. I've read it.
Senator Kennedy, I've allowed people to, the Secretary to stray over answers.
Thanks for watching, everybody. Make sure to hit that subscribe button. Turn on your notifications so every time I put out a video, you can know about it. It'll come up in your feed. Hit that like button if you liked it. And be positive. Peace.